Chapter 101, 6th Year, New Normal.
Moves like a cat and knows how to ride, girl. I can't get no satisfaction. All I want is easy action, baby. Hey. Stroll on.
Mid-December 1976. Avni knew how to kiss. She was clearly somewhat experienced, employing her tongue in a way that suggested previous practice. Florence was good with her hands, and Daisy had a filthy mouth, and Tessa knew how to move her hips just so. They were all lovely, pretty, and eager, and pliant. And it didn't matter one bit. None of them, not a single one, could hold a candle to the forest fire that seared in his blood when Sirius was with Remus. It was as terrifying as it was thrilling, a sensation like plummeting, as if he had jumped from the astronomy tower and was now in free fall, pretending he could fly. One day this will kill me, Sirius would think, pressing his mouth to Remus like he was starving, like he needed it, like he had never wanted anything else. One day we'll crash. But he couldn't make himself care enough to stop. It was never Remus who initiated, only Sirius. He knew vaguely what this meant, that it wasn't urgent for Remus the way it was for him, that the other boy didn't need it. When he let himself think about it, Sirius felt the slow creep of guilt, like he was using Remus, corrupting him. But his friend never stopped him, and Sirius was too selfish to stop himself. So he didn't. He kept going, dragging Remus into broom closets, empty classrooms, hidden alcoves. He snuck into Mooney's bed at night, shaking with the overwhelming force of his own desire. Never under the covers, of course. It wasn't like they were queer. They were just teenagers. Remus was clearly pent up, and Sirius, well, he still liked girls, obviously. Nobody could deny that, not when he had a new one on his lap every other week. He was still normal. What he had with Remus was just different. Separate. He could keep them separate, even when he found himself staring at Mooney's hands in class, watching those long fingers twitch as he took notes, thinking about how it would feel to have them tangled in his hair. It didn't matter. Sirius had self-control. At least, he had enough self-control to wait until they were out of class, until James had left for Quidditch and Peter to find Desi. He had enough self-control to make it to the nearest broom cupboard, to wait until they were in the dark before sliding his hands under Remus's jumper, tracing the patterns of his scars, running his tongue along the juncture of his jaw and neck. Yes, Sirius was very much in control. Besides, he told himself, it wasn't as if this thing with Mooney was meant to last. Eventually, Remus would find a girlfriend, and whatever it was that existed between them would fade, and everything would go back to normal. Sirius wasn't unreasonable. He knew that what they were doing didn't actually mean anything to either of them. It wasn't like it had been with Mary, where he was supposed to worry about feelings. That would be queer. So, if looking at Remus sometimes made his chest ache, or if kissing him stole the air from his lungs, or if Sirius found himself staring at Mooney afterwards as they passed a cigarette silently back and forth, thinking, "I've never wanted anything the way I want you," it was no matter. Nothing but teenage hormones and his own dramatic flair. Sirius stomped it out like sparks from a fire. Above all, he knew he couldn't let Remus see how affected he was. He was sure that if Mooney knew the things he sometimes thought, the emotions he sometimes felt, that he would be horrified, appalled, disgusted. Sirius was disgusted with himself. He wouldn't blame his friend. And he couldn't ruin what they had, not when he'd already almost destroyed their friendship once. So he turned to the girls. At first, Sirius was sure if he just found the right one, then everything would be different. Some deep stirring of passion would awaken, and the scales would fall from his eyes, and he'd finally understand what everyone had been banging on about. But after 6 weeks and 5 girls, he began to grow frustrated. It didn't seem to make a difference who it was. Being with them was like trying to get drunk on butterbeer when he'd already tasted fire whiskey. But that didn't matter. It was Sirius's problem to figure out, and not anyone else's, especially not Mooney's. Sirius knew that his friend had enough on his plate without being dragged into some strange private mess of tangled emotion. There had been another werewolf attack on the night of the December full moon, early on in the month. Witness reports indicated that it had been a pack working together. As in the summer, a family had been slaughtered. The Ministry was now on high alert about rogue werewolves, and at Hogwarts it suddenly seemed to be all that anyone wanted to talk about. Silver jewelry became all the rage, and Sirius spent quite a bit of time perfecting his transfiguration spell so that he could mutter it easily under his breath, turning necklaces, bracelets, and rings into tin. In addition to the silver jewelry, everyone had developed an opinion overnight on what exactly the Ministry should do about this new impending threat. Students who had obviously never bothered to crack open a textbook on werewolves suddenly fancied themselves experts, making all sorts of ludicrous proclamations that made Sirius cringe. "Why can't they tag them?" Avni suggested, on the afternoon following the attack. She was seated next to Sirius in the Quidditch stands, watching the Gryffindor team practice with Remus, Peter, and Lily. "I mean, there's already a registry, and they can trace underage wizards. Why not put a trace on dangerous animals? It doesn't make sense." Sirius had the sudden urge to push her down the stairs. He stifled it. "They're not animals," Lily said sharply, shooting Avni a dirty look. "They're people." Remus said nothing, staring straight ahead. "Tell that to the Mondays," Avni stiffened reproachfully. "Tell that to the latest Paul family." She scooted closer to Sirius on the bench, snuggling into his arm. "Sirius, darling, I'm cold." "Go in, then," he snapped, wriggling out of her grasp. He kept his eye on James, who was yelling at the keeper. "Excuse me?" Avni stared at him, offended. "You heard me," Sirius said coldly. "Piss off." And that was the end of things with Avni. Of course, she wasn't the only one to express such ideas. In fact, it seemed to be a fairly common sentiment amongst Hogwarts students that the Ministry should either tighten restrictions related to the registry or institute some other form of protocol that would involve tracing werewolves. Sure, there were students that argued the opposite perspective, maintaining that such measures would constitute too severe an encroachment on personal freedom. But even most of those students seemed to agree that the registry was necessary, and typically focused more on the idea that tracing werewolves would be a slippery slope that could eventually harm wizards, rather than displaying any real concern for the werewolves themselves. They were the kinds of ideas that Sirius had grown up hearing his entire life. But it was different now. He felt very aware of Moony any time one of their peers made a passing comment about the attack. Remus never said anything, never reacted in any overt way, but his face would always go flat, like a door closing, and the deep bags under his eyes lasted even after the moon was long past. Even worse, midway through the month, Remus told them he'd received a letter from his old Care of Magical Creatures professor. Apparently, he worked with Moody and had written to encourage Remus to stay at Hogwarts over Christmas instead of going back to the Potters. "It's not bloody fair," James fumed. "You're not a danger to anyone. The full moon isn't even until the new year." "It's the pack thing, though," Remus said tiredly, tugging on his tie to loosen it and throwing himself down on the bed. "They're worried I'll get captured or join up or something." Sirius frowned, allowing the door to slam shut behind him. "I thought Ferox liked you," he said, shrugging his book bag off his shoulder. "He ought to know you never joined them." "He does know," Remus said, fingers picking at the knot of his tie. "But he thinks they might force me or, well, none of us really know what might happen if I met another one." Sirius glanced nervously at James and Peter, chewing his lip. What was that supposed to mean? Did Moody really think this pack of werewolves would try and kidnap Remus? Should they be worried? Before he could think much about it, Moony pulled off his jumper, shirt riding up as he tugged it over his head. He balled it up and threw it towards the end of the bed, hair sticking out almost as crazily as James's, thanks to the static. When he turned and grinned at them, Sirius felt his throat go dry. "It's fine, anyway. I really don't mind. It'll be great to have some peace and quiet. I'm looking forward to a Christmas break from you lot." James shook his head fondly, chuckling as he grabbed his Quidditch duffel bag. "None of us believe you, Moony." "Right, I've got practice, then an hour for homework, then patrolling with Evans." The packed schedule sounded like an absolute headache to Sirius, but James grinned like he could think of nothing better than shouting at his teammates, holing up in the library, and then following Evans around like a lost puppy while she scoffed at him. Fancy it, Black? Nah, you're all right, Prongs, Sirius said casually, trying very hard not to stare as Remus unbuttoned his school shirt. You go on. I'll get a head start on that charms homework. Yeah, right. James waggled his eyebrows. Who's it tonight? Florence again? See you. He left the room whistling, with a jaunty spring in his step. Remus was reclining on the bed, fingers fiddling with one of the buttons. He met Sirius's eye and smirked slightly, like he knew exactly what he was doing. Bastard. Sirius licked his lips and looked away, turning to Peter. You go and watch him then, Pete, if you fancy. Nah, Peter said, flipping through his scattered charms notes. He had settled against the headboard of his bed, leaning back and looking concerningly comfortable right where he was. Oh, right, you're probably seeing Desi? It was a bit of a struggle to keep the strain from his voice. Remus was now pulling the tie slowly from around his neck. Nope, Peter chirped, selecting a quill. She's got patrol tonight, and she said we need to get serious about our studies now we're Newt students. Can I do my homework with you two? Sirius glanced at Remus, raising an eyebrow. The other boy shrugged, looking as if he wasn't too fussed either way. Sirius bit his lip. I'll tell you what, I forgot to return that book to the library. Better go and... Oh, Moony, while I'm at it, wasn't there another book you told me I should... Oh, right, yeah. Remus nodded, limbs tangled in the fresh jumper that he was pulling on. It's a complicated title. I better help you find it. Oh, do you want to relocate to the library then? Peter asked, glancing up at them from where he'd started to scribble on his parchment. No point, Sirius said quickly, as Remus followed him out the door. Won't take long. Won't take long? Remus hissed as they scurried down the stairs. I had to say something. They walked quickly through the common room before any other interruptions could distract them, but outside in the hallway they paused, realizing that neither of them had a destination in mind. What about the fourth-floor girls? Sirius began. No, Remus scowled. Fine. Charms classroom is free, I think. On Fridays Flitwick finishes early and there aren't any clubs. How do you know that? Oh, shut up and follow me, Sirius said, resisting the urge to reach out and grab Remus's hand to tug him along, the way he would if he was with Florence or Daisy or Eunice. They'd both become pretty good at basic alarm spells and shoved a desk in front of the door as an extra precaution, but there was no need to worry. It was Friday afternoon. Everyone was busy avoiding the classrooms at all costs. The second Remus had finished moving the desk around, Sirius was on him, pushing him into the wall and divesting him quickly of the jumper that he had just put on. When it was over, they pulled their clothes back on, and Sirius fixed his hair using the reflection in the window. Remus sat on Flitwick's desk and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. After a moment, Sirius joined him. We're going to actually have to go to the library now, Remus said absent-mindedly, focused on blowing a chain of rings, which really, really shouldn't have been sexy, but it was all Sirius could do to stop staring at his lips. Nah, he shook his head, looking away. Just say they didn't have it in. It had been nearly a year now since he had set foot in the library. He thought originally that time would make things easier, but it seemed that the more he avoided it, the harder it became to imagine walking into those dark, towering shelves. Well, that would be fine, except I was actually planning on doing my charms essay this evening. Sirius rolled his eyes, mostly because he needed something to keep his gaze from straying back to Remus's mouth again. He stared out the window, exhaling smoke and listening to the faint sound of James's captain whistle from the Quidditch pitch. Sirius found himself trying to imagine what the castle would be like at Christmas, with nearly every student gone home. Cavernous and empty and lonely. Private. Moony, are you definitely not coming for Christmas? Yeah, I've got a trust for Ox. He knows me. He knew my dad. He knew your dad? You never told us. I don't have to tell you lot everything, Remus said, prickling. He worked with him. We had a few chats about it, that's all. Well, if you trust him then. I do, Remus snapped. He was definitely irritated, though Sirius had no idea why. Sometimes it seemed like Moony could be perfectly calm one moment and ready to bite your head off the next. Okay, I was just going to say. Sirius swallowed nervously, heart pounding. Well, I mean, I could stay too, over Christmas, at Hogwarts, if it's okay with you. Oh, Remus blinked, surprised. He turned to face Sirius, studying him in a way that made heat creep up his neck. Do you want to? Yes, Sirius swallowed again, focusing on his cigarette. You shouldn't be stuck all by yourself. James has his family, and Pete, if he gets really desperate. Yeah, but won't they expect you? James's parents? They're mad about you. Sirius felt a warm rush of joy at the easy way Remus said it, like it was simple, just a plain fact. They can have Christmas as a family for once, without me crashing in. Come on, Moony, don't you want to share the common room with me? I'll be quiet and let you study if that's what you really want. He smirked, keeping his voice playful. Remus continued to stare at him, eyes burning like coals as he stubbed out his cigarette. He leaned in, like it was a challenge, kissing Sirius hard, sending heat spiraling down his spine. As if, he said, voice low in his throat. Sirius blinked as he drew away, resisting the urge to pull him back.